The Andrus Institute of Multispecies Sciences loomed above the red glass plains of a planet called Viral 7, its architecture spiked and crystalline, alien even by alien standards. Inside, 1,000 species coexisted under the pretense of equality, but real acceptance was far less universal. Sitting alone at the fringe of the crowded nourishment chamber was a girl named Selah. Her translucent blue skin shimmered faintly under the bioluminescent lights, though that glow had dulled significantly over the past several weeks. Selah was the first of her kind, an éclairée, ever admitted to the Academy. And while the gesture was historic, no one had bothered to ask what éclairée physiology required to survive. Her food tray remained untouched. A gelatinous paste of neutral protein, supposedly designed for all common metabolic types, sat quivering as she poked at it with a slender utensil. To others, it looked like she was being fussy. In reality, every bite would have further shut down her already struggling system. The compounds in the standard meal plan interfered with her nutrient absorption pathways, leaving her starving slowly in full view of hundreds. She hadn't complained in a while. The administration had made it clear, adapt or wash out. Selah knew better than to expect special treatment. After all, her world had only recently achieved stable orbital infrastructure. In the eyes of most, éclairés weren't ready for the stars. At a nearby table sat a cluster of Orvax students, silver-scaled, sharp-jawed, and loud. Their leader, Drex, was practically shimmering with amusement as he pointed toward Selah. "Look at the wraith wasting away," he snickered. "Another week and she'll be gone. Shame, really." She was almost decorative. Laughter, a cascade of clicks and metallic screeches, followed from his peers. "She should never have been admitted," muttered Vera, a female Orvax with jagged dorsal spines. Their species barely cleared fusion tech. What insights could she possibly bring? The room's tone shifted slightly when a human stepped inside. Most heads didn't turn. Humans were still novelties, but not unheard of. This one was taller than most, with curly dark hair and a confident stride. He was carrying a meal tray like everyone else. His name was Jalen Miles, the only Terran currently enrolled in the Institute, brought in under the Earth-Varelian Cultural Exchange Pact. His species had cracked faster than light travel barely a decade ago. Still, his presence had already caused waves, not because of brilliance, but because he was unpredictable. Jalen paused near the Orvax table just long enough to hear Drex's voice rise again. "Maybe we should start a betting pool. Will she faint mid-lecture or just disappear quietly?" He kept walking, though his jaw tightened. Selah was seated just 3 tables away. She didn't notice him until he placed his tray across from hers. "Hey," he said casually. "Mind if I sit?"
She blinked slowly, confused. "You are the Earth human. Last I checked." He grinned. "Jalen Miles. From a little planet that everyone calls chaotic but charming. And you're Selah, right? Éclairée?" Her gaze was cautious, her fingers twitching slightly. "Yes. But, the others do not sit here." "The others are cowards," Jalen replied, already unwrapping something from a foil pack. "I've been watching you. You're not eating." Her shoulders stiffened. "I cannot digest the compounds. The nutrition mix contains micromolecular zirconates. In éclairée, those disrupt receptor absorption." "So you're starving," he said, not unkindly. "Have you told anyone?" "3 times. They say I must adjust. As though I were faulty software." He nodded slowly, then reached into his satchel. "I figured they might ignore it. So I brought this." He placed a small plastic container in front of her. "It's human food. Verified zirconate-free. No reactive proteins. Dried fruits, grains, a bit of nut protein." Selah hesitated. Why would you give this to me? We are not kin or alliance partners. Because back on Earth, we don't let people starve if we can help it. Jalen leaned back. Also, I've been reading about eclairi digestion. Your biochemistry overlaps with Terran metabolism more than most people realize. She slowly lifted a dried fig from the box. With one careful bite, her dim glow flared brighter. Her posture straightened. It is compatible, she whispered. How did you? I guessed, Jalen said. Well, more like educated guessing. I spend a lot of time buried in xenobiology texts. From across the room, Drex noticed what was happening. His scales rippled with visible irritation. Look at the primitives, bonding over rations, he sneered, loud enough for it to carry. Do you plan to spoon-feed her too, Terran? Jalen didn't look over. Ignore them, he muttered. They've never had to fight for anything. This gesture, Sayla said between careful bites, has significance. Among eclairi, the offering of sustenance marks the forging of a trust right. Cool, Jalen said. Back home, it's called making a friend. Their moment didn't last long. Drex and two other Orvax students approached, silver armor clinking slightly. You are disturbing the harmony of the Institute, Drex said flatly. Every species here has earned their place through adaptation. Your interference weakens that process. Jalen stood up, not intimidated. Where I'm from, letting someone starve while you watch isn't adaptation. It's neglect. Your species is untested. Your opinion means nothing, Vera hissed. The eclairi girl is a biological misfit. That's not our fault. Jalen didn't flinch. You keep saying misfit like it's a flaw. But if your perfect system requires people to suffer in silence just to fit in, maybe the flaw isn't in the biology. Maybe it's in the system. The room had quieted around them. Students from dozens of species were watching now, some openly curious, others subtly alarmed. Before Drex could retort, a new voice cut through the air. That's quite enough. Everyone turned. It was Instructor Thalay, a senior researcher in comparative biology. Her four multifaceted eyes swept over the scene. Drex, she said calmly, you seem to believe your status gives you the right to interpret Academy principles. That's incorrect. Drex opened his mouth, then closed it again. Thalay turned to Sayla. Student, I've recently been made aware of your dietary incompatibilities. I apologize. A review is already underway. But how? Sayla began. Thalai's gaze flicked to Jalen. Your friend submitted a 17-page report to my office yesterday. Cross-referenced with 7 known nutrition protocols. He even cited interspecies fairness clauses. Jalen shrugged, a little sheepish. I study a lot. Thalay nodded. Effective immediately, the nourishment chamber will include eclairi-compatible options. Furthermore, any interference with this student's health or dignity will result in disciplinary action. She looked back at Drex. Including yours. As she walked away, silence reigned for a few seconds more. Then Drex turned sharply and stalked off, his pride stung. Sayla looked back at Jalen, her face unreadable. You did not have to do this. Yeah, he said, biting into his sandwich. But I wanted to. Jalen and Sayla continued eating together for the rest of the week. The eclairi's glow returned to her skin, faint at first, then brighter each day. But with every tray of food shared and every word exchanged, so too did the whispers rise throughout the halls of the Andrus Institute. He's favoring her. It's political. Another Terran making noise. The comments rolled off Jalen's back, mostly. He'd grown up on a crowded orbital colony near Saturn, where thicker skin wasn't optional. Still, he noticed the way students avoided their table. Not just the Orvax, but others too. Some species, like the Denvari, were subtle in their disdain, turning slightly, murmuring without translation. Others, like the Nexians, simply vanished from sight whenever they entered the hull. But the worst of it came in the form of silence. The kind of institutional silence that follows a ripple of change. That silence shattered one afternoon when Drex returned, not with insults, but with accusations. "You violated the Academy Concord," he said, slamming a hand onto the communal board in the library, where Sayla and Jalen were revising cross-phyla immune response models. His scales shimmered in reds and blacks, a clear display of agitation. Jalen didn't even look up. "Is that so?" "Yes," Drex snapped. "By aiding a non-Terran with unauthorized sustenance, you undermine the standardized evaluation protocols. Each species must demonstrate adaptability, without external intervention." Sayla tensed beside him, but Jalen kept his tone light. "You sound very concerned about my lunchbox." "You mistake kindness for strength," Vera said coldly from behind Drex. "Our systems are designed to weed out weakness, not accommodate it." "But what if your system is flawed?" Jalen stood now, his voice carrying farther than he intended. "You expect a desert flower to grow in a glacier and call it failure when it freezes. Sayla's body wasn't made for your rations. That doesn't make her weak. It makes your model incomplete." A soft murmuring had begun to stir throughout the library. "Enough," Drex said sharply. "We're escalating this." Sayla spoke then, quiet but clear. "You wish to escalate compassion?" "No," Drex said, "we wish to maintain integrity." Their exchange might have turned physical had it not been for another interruption, this time from the upper walkway where voices echoed between carved crystal shelves. "Integrity requires understanding," came the voice of Instructor Thelay. She descended slowly, her long cloak rippling like ink through water. Around her, even the most heated Orvacs silenced themselves. "You question the human's actions," Thelay said, addressing Drex, "but do you understand the science behind his decision?" Drex's jaw clenched. "The Eclairies' metabolic structure was never reviewed during enrollment," Thelay continued. "Jalen's report was the first documented request for accommodation based on genomic incompatibility. That oversight, our oversight, could have cost a student her life." A ripple of discomfort moved through the gathered students. "Is that not a failure of our model?" she asked. Vera narrowed her eyes. "We have survived centuries without making species-specific exceptions. You start with Eclairi meal plans, then what? Cryogenic chambers for the Terran-blooded? Planetary humidity zones for aquatic breathers?" Thelay met her stare. "If that is what equitable education demands, then yes." Drex folded his arms. "You are changing the Academy's foundation for a single case." "No," Jalen said, stepping forward. "We're expanding it. Big difference." At that moment, the library's main console chimed with an incoming message. Thelay tapped the interface and read silently. Then she looked to the students. "The Council of Curriculum and Species Equity has formally reviewed Jalen Miles' proposal," she said. "Effective immediately, new policy mandates adaptive meal options for all known biologically incompatible species." Sayla let out an audible breath. Around the room, students began murmuring again, this time in tones that bordered on curiosity rather than scorn. Drex looked like he'd swallowed a cactus. "This is absurd." "It's science," Thelay replied smoothly. "And compassion. You might consider exploring both." As Drex and his cohort stalked away, Jalen turned to Sayla. "That went better than expected." "Your intervention was heard," she said. "And amplified." Jalen smiled, then paused. "You know, when I first showed up, I just wanted to graduate. Blend in. Now I think I might be running a one-man reform committee." Sayla tilted her head. "You are not alone. Not anymore." Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Other students, quiet ones from obscure systems, started approaching them discreetly. A gas breather from the nearest belt whose exam protocols never accounted for his slower processing cycle. A synesthetic learner from Chevalis 4 who struggled under visual-based testing. A group of aquatic Phyraxians who had spent 3 semesters sharing one pressurized dorm. One by one, they shared their stories. Their quiet burdens. Their unmet needs. And Jalen wrote. He documented it all, crafting petitions backed with biology, learning theory, cross-cultural precedent, and, where possible, alliance bylaws. Sayla assisted where she could, her growing strength matched only by her increasing presence in class debates. No longer the silent girl at the edge of the room, she had become someone worth listening to. When she spoke now, even Orvax students stopped to hear her. Still, not everyone was thrilled. One afternoon, they were leaving the adaptive biology seminar when Vera appeared beside them without warning. Her scales were neutral, neither hostile nor friendly. "I have something," she said, holding out a shimmering crystal drive. 50 years of research into cross-species biochemical barriers. Private Orvax archives. You won't find most of it in the public index. Jalen raised a brow. "What's the catch?" Vera's expression flickered. "No catch. I just wanted you to know not all of us agree with Drex. Some of us have tried to change things. Quietly." "Why quietly?" Sayla asked. Vera looked away. "Our society doesn't reward deviation." She handed Jalen the drive and walked off. Later that night, Jalen stayed up reviewing its contents. Hundreds of notes, case studies, and experiments shelved because they didn't conform. Hidden away because someone feared rocking the boat. "Well," Jalen muttered to himself. "Let's go rock it." The wind outside the academy's upper tower whistled through the crystalline lattice windows, bending light into thin spirals across the library floor. Inside, Jalen and Sayla sat at a circular study table, the surface buried in data tablets, research scrolls, and one old-fashioned human spiral notebook. "Let's go over the Nexian respiratory pathway again," Jalen mumbled, flipping through diagrams on a touchscreen. "There's something weird about the tracheal bifurcation here, it doesn't match their native atmosphere's density." "Because you are looking at it through evolutionary expectations," Sayla said, pulling up a 3D model. "The Nexians underwent directed genomic restructuring about 3,000 cycles ago. Their current anatomy is the result of bioengineering, not natural progression." Jalen leaned back and whistled. "Explains the inconsistency. I thought my scans were broken." "The information was in the supplementary reading index," Sayla teased. He grinned. "You know, I've been too busy waging bureaucratic war on the administration to read every footnote." Her head tilted. "An impressive war. You've submitted proposals for the ammonia-breathing Denarians, the chronologically displaced Cronians, and the cold-blooded Scathe. You are becoming, what's the Terran term? A serial do-gooder." "I'm not doing it for credit," Jalen replied. "Someone needed to." Their conversation was interrupted by a hesitant presence. Vera, the silver-scaled Orvax who once laughed at Sayla, stood a few paces from their table. She didn't approach at first, just lingered awkwardly, as if she were trying to decide if this was a mistake. "Vera," Sayla said carefully. "Is there something you require?" Vera hesitated. "I want to speak. If permitted." Jalen raised an eyebrow but gestured to an open seat. She didn't sit. "I want to acknowledge," she began, scales rippling a muted blue, "the Orvax signal of humility, or perhaps shame, that our earlier treatment of you was unworthy of the standards we claim to uphold." "You mean when you said I was a mistake of evolutionary biology?" Sayla said calmly. "Yes," Vera replied without defensiveness. "And I regret it." There was a silence, not quite forgiving yet not hostile either. "We did attempt reform once," Vera continued. "Some of us." Quietly. "The administration would not yield. Tradition here is calcified." She reached into her tunic and pulled out a crystal drive, placing it gently on the table. This contains unpublished studies, rejected proposals, and suppressed metabolic models, including biochemical interaction matrices between the major species. Some go back half a century. They could help with your exam, or your campaign. Jalen blinked. You're giving this to us? Vera nodded. Drex and his circle don't speak for all of us. The Orvacs are more than their loudest voices. With that, she turned and walked off, leaving only the crystal behind. Sayla picked it up, scanning the index. She's telling the truth. This is valuable. Some of it predates the Institute's founding. For the next 5 hours, they pored over the archive. Sayla cross-referenced metabolic profiles while Jalen decoded species-specific interaction patterns. They found forgotten records of nutrition deficiencies, environmental incompatibilities, and cultural clashes that had never been resolved, just buried. It painted a troubling picture. For all its prestige, the Andrus Institute had long chosen standardization over inclusion. But a pattern emerged too. Students from newly admitted species, those still adapting to galactic norms, struggled disproportionately. Not due to lack of intelligence, but because the system ignored their differences. As the ambient lighting dimmed toward curfew, Sayla closed her tablet and looked at Jalen with a spark in her eye. I have been contemplating something. Dangerous words, Jalen said with a smirk. The Xeno trials. He blinked. The practical exam next month? Yes, she said. It is framed as a test of individual knowledge. But in real xenoscientific fieldwork, we operate in interdisciplinary teams. No one species can solve the entire puzzle alone. Because they process the galaxy differently, Jalen murmured, catching on. You're saying the exam model itself is flawed? She nodded. If we take the trial together, collaboratively, we can demonstrate that cooperation across species yields superior outcomes. He looked around the empty library as if seeing it anew. But the rules say it's an individual assessment. They do not prohibit collaboration, Sayla replied. Only assume it will not occur. A moment passed between them. Excitement. Fear. Possibility. We'd need more than just the two of us, Jalen said finally. Sayla's eyes twinkled. We may already have allies we did not expect. The next week was a flurry of whispered conversations, carefully worded invitations, and cautious explanations. Jalen and Sayla quietly approached students from underrepresented species, those who had struggled under the rigid protocols. A Denvar named Crix, whose crystalline body could detect electromagnetic fields invisible to humanoids. A Cronian student named Tila, who experienced time at an accelerated pace. An aquatic student from Gallus Prime, whose neural network interfaced with sonar instead of vision. Even Vera, hesitant but firm, agreed to join. Together, they drafted a proposal, a unified team entry into the Xeno trials. Not as rebellion, but as proof of a better way. They submitted it directly to Instructor Thalay. The professor read their request in silence, her 4 eyes scanning every word. When she reached the bottom, she looked up. Expression unreadable. This is highly irregular, she said. But not against the rules, Jalen offered. Thalay tapped her clawed fingers on the table, thinking. There will be opposition. Let them oppose, Sayla said. We are not asking to replace the old system. Only to show that another path exists. Thalay studied the group. Slowly, a small smile spread across her expression. Very well, she said. Prepare yourselves. If you're going to challenge 7 centuries of academic tradition, you'd best make it convincing. Word of the proposal spread like wildfire. Drex was furious. You're undermining the entire educational structure, he shouted across the courtyard when Jalen passed. You think teamwork proves anything? It proves weakness. Then prove your strength, Jalen said evenly. Take the trial your way. We'll take it ours. Let the results speak. That was all it took. The duel was set, not of fists, but of ideologies. Individual excellence versus collaborative strength. Old world versus new. The Xeno trials were no longer just an exam. They were a battlefield. The Xeno trials were the Andrus Institute's most sacred rite, an annual crucible that tested students not just on their knowledge, but their application of alien biology, technology, and cultural strategy in live, adaptive simulations. Traditionally, it was an isolating ordeal, one student per pod, one mind against the galaxy's endless unknowns. But this year, everything changed. A second chamber had been added, larger, surrounded by multiple observation decks. Transparent walls revealed the glinting red skies of Viral 7, but all eyes inside were focused on the 15 students standing together at the center. They came from 11 different species. Humanoids, crystalline forms, bipeds with reverse-jointed legs, and serpentine crawlers. At their front stood Jalen and Sayla, shoulder to shoulder. Each wore the same neutral uniform, each carried the same uncertain weight, to prove that difference didn't divide, it completed. Instructor Thalay stood at the center dais. Her multiple arms moved in perfect symmetry as she activated the central interface. Her voice echoed across the chamber. Welcome to the Xeno trials. Today's simulation will mirror real galactic fieldwork across unfamiliar planetary environments. Each challenge you face has been drawn from historical incidents, crisis scenarios, ethical dilemmas, and biotechnological anomalies. She paused and looked at Jalen's team. This is the first time a collaborative cohort has been approved for trial. It is experimental. But the council will be observing. Behind her, the VIP gallery flickered into life, representatives from over 30 Alliance member worlds, their faces partially obscured by atmospheric filters, neural visors, or simply distance. Among them stood High Consul Raylin of Nexia, a tall figure adorned in robes stitched with planetary crests. His presence alone confirmed how high the stakes had risen. You will be scored not only on success, Thalay continued, but on insight, adaptability, and interspecies coordination. The trial begins in 60 seconds. As she stepped away, Sayla turned to the team. Her voice was calm. Remember what we practiced. Roles based on ability, not biology. Trust one another's instincts. Vera spoke next, her tone clipped but focused. Cronians take event sequencing. Denvarians, energy detection. Humans coordinate logic matrices. Sayla, you and I will monitor biochemical flux. Jalen nodded. Let's do this. The trial began with darkness. Then a three-dimensional landscape unfolded around them, a simulated planet, lush, alien, teeming with exotic lifeforms and unexplained energy signatures. A blinking alert filled the sky. Scenario 1, planetary instability. Unknown source. 2 million lifeforms at risk. Respond. The group scattered into motion, falling into roles almost by instinct. The Denvarians, Crix and Tylern, spread across rocky ridgelines, using their translucent crystal bodies to scan for energy anomalies. Their shifting colors transmitted real-time data back to Sayla, who coordinated with 2 aquatic students interpreting water quality fluctuations. Meanwhile, Tila, the Cronian, zipped through probability models, processing days of potential shifts in seconds. There's an energy node beneath the southern tectonic shelf, she reported. Disruption initiated 3.2 hours ago. If left unchecked, full collapse in 12 minutes. Can we neutralize it? Sayla asked. Not naturally, said Crix, tones harmonic. Pattern suggests artificial origin. Someone did this. Jalen's eyes narrowed. We need a counter-frequency pulse, something that can target the destabilization wave and reverse it. But how do we generate that? Vera stepped forward. Vidian Terra Stabilization Tech. We used it during frontier colonization. It modulates fault-line resonance. But we need amplification, Sayla said. Eclairy neurocatalysts can augment mineral vibrational response. I'll coordinate target deployment, Jalen said, opening a schematic interface. We'll triangulate using HFYx's data and aim for seismic convergence points. For the next 7 minutes, their team moved as one. Data, instincts, sensory feedback, and biochemistry merged into a fluent rhythm. At first it was clunky, species misreading each other's timing or cues, but the longer they worked, the smoother it became. By the time they launched the pulse, the energy signature beneath the planet's crust had already begun to dissipate. The planetary model stabilized. Wildlife migration resumed. Atmospheric turbulence calmed. Across the chamber, the alert flickered green. Scenario 1, Success, 100% lifeform preservation. Inside the viewing gallery, hushed voices erupted into debate. Meanwhile, the individual exam pods, where the other 200 students faced mirrored simulations, showed more varied outcomes. Most had ordered evacuation. Some preserved cultural artifacts, others saved half the population, but none had detected the source of the anomaly, let alone neutralized it. Back in the collaborative chamber, the next scenario loaded in. Scenario 2, Pathogenic outbreak, multi-species colony. Identify vector. Contain spread. This time, Jalen took the lead. Sayla, cross-check immune responses. Cronians, trace incubation intervals. I need a symptom map by organism class. The simulation ramped up in complexity. Overlapping symptoms across 14 lifeforms. Conflicting treatment protocols. Ethical questions about isolating uninfected children from unknown carriers. But the team wove through it all, not by consensus, but by synergy. Sayla detected that the pathogen bonded with sulfur-based DNA, which only 3 of the colony's species shared. The aquatic student suggested using high-pressure hydrostatic purging, safe for 2/3 of the infected. HFYx developed a containment chamber tuned to resonance frequencies, neutralizing the airborne strain without harming the host species' cellular structure. Jalen used basic human crisis protocols, triage strategies learned on Earth during orbital pandemics. Result, outbreak contained. No deaths. Ethical violations avoided. Another green light blinked overhead. And in the gallery, High Consul Raylin leaned forward in his seat. By the end of the 5-hour simulation, the individual examinees had completed 8 scenarios. The collaborative team had faced only 5, but each was exponentially more complex and resolved with complete systemic preservation. When the chamber lights returned to normal and the simulation dissolved, the room fell into silence. Then came the Chancellor's voice. Remarkable, he said, descending the stairs slowly. Instructor Thalay and the other faculty gathered behind him, faces unreadable. Both trials, he continued, demonstrated competence. But one demonstrated vision. He turned toward the collaborative team. Not because of what you knew, but because of how you learned. Together. Drex, standing among the individual examinees, stepped forward. With respect, High Consul, the traditional methods have stood for centuries. We mustn't abandon them over a political stunt. Who said anything about abandoning? The Chancellor replied smoothly. We evolve, Drex. Like any species. We do not discard. We expand. He turned back to Instructor Thalay. I formally recommend the creation of a parallel academic track, focused on collaborative xenoscience. With dedicated curricula, revised assessment, and cross-species mentoring. Thalay blinked slowly. So ordered, High Consul. The hall erupted, not in rebellion, but discussion. Laughter, disbelief, even applause. Jalen glanced at Sayla. Did we just rewrite academic history? She gave a faint smile. No. We simply reminded it what it had forgotten. In the days following the Xeno trials, the Andrus Institute transformed from an elite academy to the eye of a galactic storm. Within hours of the Chancellor's announcement, dozens of Alliance news networks began broadcasting highlights from the simulation. Footage of the collaborative team, 15 species solving the unsolvable together, flashed across planets light-years apart. Jalen's speech about adaptation. Sayla's coordination of multibiological systems. Vera's resonance stabilizer. But more than any speech or data point, what stuck was the visual, a group of species, once ignored and isolated, now standing at the center of the most prestigious institution in the galaxy, as equals. The Institute responded quickly. Construction teams began retrofitting classrooms and dormitories to accommodate a wider range of environmental needs. Water tank lounges for aquatic species. Modular gravity zones. Nutrition labs staffed with species-specific chefs. And in the main dining hall, one table was never empty again, the one where Jalen and Sayla had first shared food. Now it was a symbol. One afternoon, Jalen leaned over it and whispered, "I'm pretty sure this is becoming a tourist attraction." "Perhaps," Sayla replied, her voice calm. "But it's also becoming a precedent." Their friendship, once an anomaly, had become a blueprint. But not everyone welcomed the changes. Drex, whose pride had suffered a galactic bruising, tried once more to steer the narrative. He confronted Jalen outside the hololab, his tone guarded but oddly civil. "Human," he said. "I wish to speak." Jalen crossed his arms. "Go ahead." Drex hesitated. His scales shifted through a muted palate. "I misjudged. Your methods. Your motives. And the Eclairie's place here. I offer apology." Jalen said nothing. Then Drex turned to Sayla, who had stepped quietly beside Jalen. "To you especially. I labeled your biology a liability. It was ignorance. Not logic." Sayla's eyes glimmered faintly. "And now? I see adaptation differently," Drex said. "It is not simply endurance. It is transformation. I am still learning." She nodded. "Then the apology is accepted." That might have been the end of it, but Drex added, "The Chancellor asked me to help develop the collaborative tracks evaluation protocols. I'd value your input." Jalen raised a brow. "Really? We may differ in method," Drex said, "but I now understand your results." Vera later told them that Drex had endured intense pressure from conservative Orvax circles, and that agreeing to serve on the new committee was as much political survival as personal growth. "That's still something," Jalen said with a shrug. "Progress in any direction beats standing still." Meanwhile, the wider galaxy took notice. Sayla received a message from the Eclairie High Council requesting her to represent their species in future educational symposia. Jalen's inbox overflowed with invitations to speak at interspecies think tanks. But the most unexpected message came directly from Instructor Thalay. She summoned them both to her chamber and said, without preamble, "Your examination results have been placed into the Institute archives. A permanent record." "Wait," Jalen said. "You mean like, study material?" Thalai's eyes sparkled. "More like foundational case study. You've rewritten our methodology. The Academy will now offer 2 equal paths to graduation, traditional and collaborative. Both valid. Both prestigious. I assume we'll be helping build the second one," Sayla said. Thalay smiled. "Correct. You've both been granted research fellowship status." Jalen blinked. "I was just trying to help someone not starve." "And you did," Thalay said. "But in doing so, you fed an entire system the nutrients it needed to grow." The next few months passed in a blur of lectures, travel, and policy meetings. Jalen and Sayla found themselves becoming unlikely celebrities, invited to Alliance conferences, cited in xenoscience journals, even referenced in debates at the Galactic Council. Their shared origin became legend, a human sharing food with a stranger in need. Sayla once joked, on Eclairi, we say, the smallest light still casts a shadow across mountains. Your fig bar may be the most influential foodstuff in academic history. Jalen laughed. Not bad for snacks from Earth. On the 6-month anniversary of the Xeno trials, they stood on the highest observation deck of the Institute, overlooking Nexus Plain. Below them, new collaborative buildings sparkled under construction. Student gardens bloomed with flora from 37 different worlds. Jalen leaned on the railing. We changed the way they teach. Sayla's skin glowed softly in the evening light. We reminded them how to learn. And it all started because I offered you lunch. No, she corrected. It started because you saw me. They stood in silence, watching as a group of first-year students, 2 aquatic, 1 crystalline, 1 human, walked together into the dining hall, laughing. It wasn't perfect. Some factions still resisted change. Some species remained skeptical. But the Institute was different now. Open, curious, evolving. And somewhere, beneath all the noise, one simple truth had taken root. Helping one person can transform an institution. Sharing a meal can shift a culture. A human and an Eclairi proved that. And so, what began as a simple act of kindness, a human offering food to a starving alien, grew into a movement that reshaped one of the most prestigious institutions in the galaxy. Jalen and Sayla's story became a model for the entire Andromeda Alliance. Their collaborative approach to science and education opened the door for countless others. Students from remote planets, marginalized species, and overlooked cultures who finally saw themselves not just surviving, but thriving within the system. Their influence didn't stop at the academy gates. Across the Alliance, schools began re-evaluating their own rigid traditions. Scientific councils implemented cross-species mentorship programs. Entire planetary systems adopted the principles that emerged from one cafeteria conversation. But perhaps most importantly, the narrative changed. For centuries, diversity had been treated as a problem to manage, an obstacle to uniformity. Now, it was seen as an advantage, a wellspring of strength and innovation. Not in theory, but in practice. All of this because one person asked, "Mind if I join you?" Because one person said, "Come eat with me." So wherever you are in the galaxy, whether human, Eclairi, or something else entirely, remember that sometimes the smallest choices can ripple the farthest. A moment of compassion. A shared table. A willingness to listen instead of judge. These are the seeds of real change. Thanks for joining us on this journey. If you connected with this story, even a little, drop a comment below and let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness isn't just powerful, it's revolutionary. There's another video on your screen right now that continues this theme. Give it a watch, and until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and stay human. Big hug. See you soon.